Man, we have a lot to get to here today. If you woke up this morning, grab the phone, you're scrolling, whatever social media platform, you've probably seen some more talks about tariffs, right? It's been a topic of conversation for so long, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be any end in sight. So we're going to talk about the tariffs here and the latest with that when it comes to the Trump administration. Harris County also sues the president over mass federal layoffs. Another one of his agenda items here with Doge making cuts. Well, now we have Harris County suing as well. And we also have an Amber Alert here. We'll get to that as well. Let's jump right in. First, we have a late night home invasion that took place in Southwest Houston. Let's go to our reporter, Jillian Hartman, who's going to give us some details on that. Hey, Jillian.
Well, a homicide investigation is underway after police say a man was shot and killed inside his garage here late last night in Southwest Houston. You can see here what appears to be a bullet hole. This happened just before 10 o'clock last night along Lunnington Drive. Now, we just got our hands on surveillance video from a neighbor across the street. Take a look here. You can see the timestamp says 9:56 p.m. It shows a truck pulling up near the garage. Then seconds later, you can see the garage door open halfway. Then two men run out. One man appears to be holding a weapon. Then the truck takes off. This happened all within a minute. Now, police say they found the man who was shot inside his home and he died from his injuries. They say the shooting may have stemmed from a robbery. Right now, police are investigating and looking for those suspects. And I did just talk to some neighbors. They tell me this is a pretty quiet neighborhood. They find this very shocking and surprising. We'll have more on their interviews tonight at 5 and 6 on Fox 26 and on our Fox Local app.
All right, Jillian, thank you so much again. As she mentioned, you're going to get more on that story at 5 and 6. All right, let's get to the tariffs, right? Because personal point of reference here, this weekend, my wife and I were just kind of online looking at different websites, and Shein, which is another popular website folks get clothes from in China, they're not telling folks that there's going to be an increase of like 300% on some of these products. So Shein turned into she out of her mind because I'm not buying that at that price, right? So I went somewhere else. But anyway, it was reported earlier here this morning that Amazon would be going ahead to display a little number and letting people know how much the Trump tariffs are going to increase their price when they check out. Just a little bit ago, before we came here on air, we found out that Jeff Bezos came out, released a statement essentially saying it was just an idea. Hey, we're thinking about it, not a done deal just yet, or maybe it won't happen at all. Although now, though, we are still seeing other companies, like I mentioned, Shein, and also Temu now already showing folks what those increased prices will be. So White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and the U.S. Treasury Secretary reacted to some of that news here today. If you missed any of it, take a quick listen.
This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that it's not a surprise because, as Reuters recently wrote, Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm. So this is another reason why Americans should buy American. It's another reason why we are onshoring critical supply chains here at home to shore up our own critical supply chain and boost our own manufacturing here.
Is Jeff Bezos still a Trump supporter?
Look, I will not speak to the president's relationships with Jeff Bezos, but I will tell you that this is certainly a hostile and political action by Amazon. And Secretary, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I would also add that the bringing down the terrible Biden inflation has been a priority for the first 100 days of the Trump administration, and President Trump has done a great job of leading that since January 20th. Interest rates, mortgage rates are down, gasoline and energy prices are down. We're expecting the further decreases.
All right, let's jump into some of this, right? Because I really want to pinpoint a couple things here, and I'm not the expert when it comes to tariffs. So joining me now to discuss this latest back and forth and when it comes to tariffs, we are joined by Professor Dietrich von Biedenfeld with the University of Houston downtown. Professor, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
Okay, so you heard that statement just now. Do you view this as a political statement, as the White House press secretary mentioned there, from Amazon, or is this simply transparency? Because many folks would tell you a tariff is a tax.
Absolutely. And it is an increase in expense for either the consumer or the business. And the business is going to pass on as many expenses to the consumer as possible to increase that P over L. So when we think about the political aspect, I think it was an effort to sort of diffuse any tension or animosity to the company and deflect it and say, no, this is a government issued tax. In many ways, in the way that if you live in Texas, we do the appraisal district versus property tax rate.
Right.
So there's a little bit of deflection, a little bit of smoke and mirrors where we say who is actually responsible. At the end of the day, the consumer is going to pay more regardless. So there are other companies, particularly Swedish companies, Chinese companies, Taiwanese companies that are trying to be transparent. Many distributors of those products, commodities, are already evidencing that with their sort of supply chain. And so they're saying at these large commercial grade, they're already demonstrating this. But for the actual consumer, when the de minimis exception goes away next week, they're anticipating that by moving that removal this week and saying, hey, next week when these things arrive, because of course there's shipping time, lead times, these things are going to be more expensive for us, and it's not us. Don't be mad at Temu. Don't be mad at Shine. Be mad at your administration.
Now, you just mentioned de minimis exemption. Kind of explain that to folks about what that is a little bit here, because that directly impacts the goods and the shipments that come across the seas.
Absolutely. Typically, goods under $800 have been exempted from certain tariffs because we understand that small businesses and individual consumers bear the brunt of that, and they're not able to offset that expense in the same way as some of these big box retailers, multinational corporations. But at this point, we're saying, no, we're going all out, and if people won't negotiate with the United States, the administration is saying, no, we're removing that exemption, and we're going to enforce this tariff across the board, 25% up to 145%, depending on the country and depending on the commodity or service.
So now if you're a small business or you're a large business, like a business in general, I would imagine some businesses have the ability to switch or change where they manufacture products. Instead of China, maybe they go to Vietnam or something. Are you starting to see some of that with businesses trying to just change where the manufacturing is being done and try to offset some of the impacts of the tariffs?
Absolutely, particularly with car manufacturers, because we know that these are assembled from many, many parts, software components, hardware components, steel, rubber, and all these other accompanying raw materials that go into a vehicle. And we've seen different suppliers and producers moving either to Mexico. So General Motors is looking and saying, okay, we're going to try to do more here. Dodge, Chrysler, Stellantis, those groups are saying maybe we just actually focus on Mexico and do our exports. So we're seeing that, but as you pointed out, the small businesses don't have that luxury. They don't have the market strength to have that negotiating position, and they also don't have the supplier networks to sort of leverage those things. So a lot of these small businesses are going to have the challenge of even trying to negotiate a new supplier, because many of the existing suppliers domestically are already at their capacity or have existing contracts, non-compete agreements, and other legal things that would restrict them from working with the small businesses.
And a small business would have been able to use the minimus exemption to kind of, continue to get some of those goods. But with that going away, that's a larger hill for them to a larger issue for them to overcome, right? Is that
absolutely?
Okay. So now if you're a small business and this is kind of this ongoing tariff issue here, how long are you going to be able to sustain some of this stuff here? Because I feel like ultimately there might be a tipping point for the economy if small businesses are no longer the lifeblood of, our everyday.
Well, we can look at the statistics. Small Business Administration produces quite a bit. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics produces quite a bit of information. So we can look to those sources to see what those lifespan of the average starting company is. And it's not great, particularly restaurants, we know. Anecdotally, we have these statistics that we shoot off that are pretty close to accurate, where we say maybe 50% of the small businesses that start out aren't going to survive 3 years. And so already they're working with very small margins and challenges. And so many of these small businesses are either going to have to discontinue product lines, reduce their offerings, or immediately pass on that cost to consumers, which makes them less competitive with the big box retailers, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Albertsons that say, no, we're not going to accept any increases in prices for our goods because we're not going to pass this on to our consumers either. So they don't have that negotiating power, and so they are already starting to struggle, cancel contracts, or reduce the products offered on their sites. And
one thing the White House press secretary mentioned is the onshoring of goods and services. And I think COVID is a good point of reference for us, right? Because manufacturing some of that stuff we really needed was a bit difficult. So the president at the time had to implement some executive orders to make that happen, some wartime measures to make sure we can ramp up manufacturing. So onshoring is not a bad thing, right? But maybe the follow through might be some of the issue here.
One of the challenges is making sure you have a qualified workforce. We have quite a few federal regulations, and so we're not doing these things in conjunction. And so one of the challenges, of course, of implementing these tariffs before we have the education training or removal of certain CDL requirements or licensing requirements for those new employees is saying, who are these qualified workforce people? Do they need 9 months of training before they can do the job? Do they need 12 months of training before I could not go into a manufacturing plant and begin welding tomorrow.
Correct.
Not only for OSHA standards, but also just the quality of my welds would not be good. So there is a little bit of lead time that's been challenged. We are excited about the idea of onshoring, that domestic security, particularly for national security, onshoring, nearshoring. The challenge of looking at that perspective is, of course, as we see the 25% tariffs for Canada and Mexico. We did have some concessions made in the agricultural area earlier this week to ensure that we are protecting crops. So some of those agreements with Mexico are moving forward, but we still have certain challenges. And part of that training, lead time, et cetera, is being demonstrated as China eases some of their reciprocal tariffs or retaliatory tariffs and says, actually, we don't have the quality airline parts. We don't have the technical skills to produce these things. Right. Certain energy sources. So China has actually backed off of some of theirs, working towards the administration's intended plans, not necessarily because they agree, but out of necessity, and saying we don't have the skilled labor or technical expertise to produce these things. We're going to have to exempt them and accept them from the United States anyway.
That is a portion of the conversation that I never even thought about, was the lead time for the skilled workers. Dietrich, thank you so much. We'll be talking with you again. Great conversation, always super informative, and I feel like I walk away with this. Like, next thing you know, I'll be talking tariffs myself because I know what I'm talking about. I appreciate you, man. All right, let's jump back in here. President Donald Trump, he will visit Warren, Michigan here today for a rally. It's going to be a day for him to basically outline and celebrate his most successful and monumental moments here in his first 100 days in his administration. The president has signed more than 140 executive orders, with many facing legal action. The Texas Democratic Women of Harris County Metro Chapter held a news conference just a while ago in response to many of those executive orders. Again, we're talking 140, which they say put democracy in jeopardy. As you know, there's a lot of legal cases right now stuck. No decision just yet, but action still being done here by the Trump administration. So let's hear what they have to say.
So it is not surprising that the president is getting an F rating in many polls, right? It's the lowest rating that a president has got in 80 years. We have to go back to the Truman administration to find a president who has signed over 100 executive orders in a year. President Trump has signed 140 in the first 100 days. But what does signing the executive orders mean? It means that he's power grabbing. He's taking the power from Congress, he's taking the power from the judiciary, completely ignoring the checks and balances and the basis of our democracy. So, besides that, he has exceeded his power. He has ignored due process by deporting people without allowing them their day in court, now wondering if it will be okay, or thinking about deporting US citizens or having them serve in foreign prisons, and dismantling, of course, the government. This is a pivotal moment in the history of our country. We have never seen this amount of change in the country, in the history of the country. And we have to speak up. We are standing on the shoulders of Martin Luther King, of Rosa Parks, of John Lewis, of Philip Randolph, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta.
All right. Also happening here today, it was a busy day this afternoon. So Harris County joined a number of unions and other groups in filing a lawsuit challenging what they call the Trump administration's unlawful reorganization of the federal government and layoffs that we see happening all across various federal agencies, primarily because of Doge, Elon Musk, and his efforts there. But we heard from the Harris County attorney, Christian Menefee, what he had to say about this issue. Take a listen.
Today, Harris County is joining a coalition of labor organizations and local governments from across the country, and we're suing them. Let's be clear, this order is not about eliminating waste. It's about gutting the federal government and hurting working people. The executive order freezes hiring so agencies can only fill one job for every few that are vacated. It lays off employees at an unprecedented scale in the history of our country with no regard for the law or what Congress has to say. And most importantly, it eliminates entire offices and services without congressional approval. This is an unconstitutional, extra statutory power grab. He's not downsizing government, he is kneecapping it. Trump's order will slash staffing at more than 20 federal agencies, but let's talk about 3 that hit home to folks here in Harris County. Social Security offices. These offices already have long lines. They're how people in our community access benefits that they've paid into their entire lives. But now the Trump administration will institute staff cuts and people will be pushed away from getting what they've earned. The EPA is losing 65% of its workforce potentially under President Trump's plan. In neighborhoods like Fifth Ward, Kashmere Gardens, Pleasantville, we've spent the last few years fighting environmental racism, and the EPA has been one of the few federal agencies that actually shows up. You slash their money and our communities will suffer. The VA. Houston has one of the largest VA hospitals in the entire country, but with many of its workers on the chopping block, wait times will grow and care will suffer. We owe our veterans better than this. Harris County is suing today because this is not theoretical. We are already seeing the harm to the services that we provide. Because CDC staff are gone, our health department can't get timely data on disease outbreaks. Because FEMA is laying off people. When we interact with FEMA and the National Weather Service, we're still waiting on reimbursements from past hurricanes. But without that additional staff, our information will be lower than necessary to serve.
That was, again, Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee there talking about the lawsuit. Now, we're going to certainly keep an eye on this and, of course, getting some reaction here from the Trump administration. You would bet they would certainly have something to say about that. Next. So about a couple weeks now, we've been following this next story. Reporter Leslie Delaspore has been over at the Westbury Reserve Apartments. That's in Southwest Houston. The folks there have been really dealing with some disgusting and smelly mess. The trash has continued to pile up and pile up. So now Leslie's back out there and she's got an update on this story.
Fox 26 News reporter Leslie Delaspore here. I've been covering a story at the Westbury Reserve Apartments on Fondren about unsanitary living situations for many of the residents here. When I first did the story about a week ago, this is what the trash looked like. Residents said that they have been living here with that trash, looking at that day in and day out in very unsanitary living conditions. Residents say the trash had not been picked up for weeks. So I reached out to the owner of the complex, but I also reached out to the city. We reached out to Solid Waste, Public Works, the health department, as well as Republic Services, who owns and operates these bins and contracts with the company to provide them so that people can put their trash in there. We also heard from Mayor Pro Tem Martha Castex Tatum, who represents District K. Now, all of their statements and all of their findings when they came here to not only clean up the property, but inspect the property are on our website. But just a few days ago, we were contacted by the owner of the complex at Westbury Reserve Apartments, and he actually sat down with me on Zoom for an interview, and he tells me that he did not know about the conditions at this apartment. He hired a company called AMC Management, and he says that that trash bill had not been paid, as well as there were so many other things that they did not take care of, and he was absolutely flabbergasted by it. We spoke with the owner of the complex, as I mentioned, but he gave me a list of things that he said is going to be taken care of immediately. Obviously, the first thing on that list that was already taken care of is the trash pickup. As you can see, it's no longer here. He says he's also going to be taking care of AC issues as well as sewage issues. He says he's going to interview and hire new maintenance staff immediately. He also says that he is going to confirm work and pay for units getting boarded up. And he's also going to order and pay for supplies at Lowe's as needed. He's also going to communicate with various people at AMC to get the funds in his account released. And those are just a few. Now, coming up at 5 and 6, you'll hear more from the owner about his claims against the company that he hired to take care of his property. And he also dives deep into more on what he's doing to ensure residents are safe and healthy. Reporting in Southwest Houston, Leslie Delaspore, Fox 26 News.
All right, Leslie, thank you. Next up, the Texas Center for Missing Persons. The organization has been in our community for more than 20 years, trying to reunite families with their missing loved ones. Some really great work. But this weekend, they're back with their annual Missing in Southeast Texas Day in hopes to bring more missing persons home. Anchors Melissa Wilson and Delon Dillard spoke with Melissa Turnquist, the CEO of the Texas Center for the Missing, about what's coming up.
Texas Center for the Missing Persons organization has worked for over 20 years to reunite families with their missing loved ones.
Working so hard to do this. This weekend, they're back with their annual Missing in Southeast Texas Day in hopes to bring more missing persons home. Here to explain is Melissa Turnquist. Hello and welcome. Thanks for being here. This is so very important. Talk to me about how you got involved and why this is such an important mission.
It's so important because you never know when your family is going to be in crisis. And many times people think of missing persons as missing children. And of course, that's a critically important population within the missing persons group. However, we activate more silver alerts than amber alerts now in the Houston area because our population is aging. And Missing in Southeast Texas Day is a powerful opportunity for families, whether your loved one's been missing an hour or decades, you can come and get resources on Saturday.
How many people are currently in your database right now?
Currently, every year over 13,000 individuals are reported missing in our 14-county greater Houston area. About 10,000 of those are in two of our largest agencies, and they only have 18 investigators. So it's important that the community work together to bring resources to the families so we can truly bring everybody home.
Do you see a turnaround year after this event, after families get those resources? Do they have a better chance of finding their loved ones?
Absolutely. We know as a direct result of Missing in Southeast Texas Day that we've found 11 individuals and we've identified 20. Wow. And one of those cases was over 40 years old. So just the power of getting all that information in one place, and that's the great thing about Missing in Southeast Texas Day. It's a one-stop shop. You can come and make your missing persons report. You get a DNA swab. There's age progression imagery done by a forensic artist, and also support groups, and then panel discussions so families can share resources with one another.
So what do you need to bring with you?
It's important to bring a picture ID of yourself, whoever's making the missing persons report. The best possibility is to have 2 family members on the mother's side to get DNA swabs, and then a good headshot or photo of the missing loved one.
That's interesting. Why the mother's side?
I am not a scientific expert.
Okay.
However, through University of North Texas, their DNA lab, they're able to do a deeper dive DNA profile. And through genetics, the mother's side is just a better way to create a more profound profile.
How interesting. It's just the first time I'd heard it, so thanks for better explaining
It's one of my speaking points, and so I have to make sure I say it.
Sure.
So please, yes.
emergency alerts on your phone? Are they silenced or do you let them blare? The woman behind the Amber Alert system says these alerts have become too routine, oversaturated, and misused.
There is a very, very distinct difference between an Amber Alert and a missing child.
Here's the Amber Alert criteria. A reasonable belief by law enforcement that an abduction has occurred, and that the child is in imminent danger of injury or death. Also, there must be enough information about the child and the suspect so that the public can help. One former Texas sheriff says too often the alerts are being used in child custody cases and recalls one conversation he had with an officer.
Yeah, he admitted, he said, well, what we do in those child custody cases, we use it because it scares that non-custodial parent into bringing the kid back.
Diana Simone also wants the system to change from an emergency alert to a text.
Cell phones today, the minute you touch OK on the alert, it disappears, and you have to know where to hunt it down before you can get access that information again. I mean, if Sprouts can text me that mushrooms are on sale, certainly we can find a way to text the Amber Alerts to where they do not disrupt and jar people's life, where they have the information available.
What do you think? Are Amber Alerts too routine? Does the system need an overhaul? Let me know.
All right, welcome back to Houston Live and Local. We are in the newsroom, kind of walking around the newsroom a little bit. So my colleagues just got out of our afternoon meeting, so everyone's kind of getting ready to kind of plan their stories. And I heard Coco Dominguez working on something here. We're going to share some information for those of you in Conroe, near Conroe, want to go to Conroe. It's pretty good. So Coco, what's up?
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? Okay. Hi, guys. So
I'm gonna give you the mic. I'm gonna give
take
you
it
the
away.
mic. Take it away. What's going on?
All right. So the San Jacinto River Authority has got a new lease. Lake Conroe Park closed last year. Now they've got a new lease, new management owned by local residents and business owners. So they're adding an entire beach theme to a beach theme. They're adding a beach, they're adding an amphitheater, picnic tables, they're adding everything. They're rolling that things out in phases. So May 24th is the day that they're looking to open it. But they're starting, the first phase is like hiring staff and different things like that. But they're going to have so much cool stuff, food trucks and all that stuff. So it's a really big deal. You know, people love Lake Conroe. I don't know if you.
I've never been.
I love Lake Conroe. You can do all. I've rented little boats out there. You can do so much. There's parties on Lake Conroe.
You know I love me a
Yeah.
party. You know I love me a
So
party.
literally, you can go on Lake Conroe and go and pull up to the beach park, and there are like concerts happening.
I love that.
It's a whole thing. But now the actual park that's already there, they're adding a beach theme to it.
Okay.
So it is a really big deal. I'm hoping to talk to them today, if not this week for sure. But that's just something exciting for you. Don't even have to live in Conroe. This is like a staycation. You go out there. Margaritaville is out there. I know you like good
I like
margaritas.
margaritas too.
Let's talk about all things Anthony loves.
No. We ain't got time for that. We got 10 seconds left. On that note, Coco, thank you. And thank you guys for watching Houston Live and Local. We'll see you back here on the stream tonight at 7 o'clock. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.